And welcome to those present, and I declare this meeting open on the 14th of August 2024 at 6 p.m. The City of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. And we pay our respects to elders past and present and their descendants. The terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted on the door as you enter, and please ensure that you have read them prior to attending this meeting and abide by them. Tonight's attendance and apologies. We have all councillors in attendance except Councillor Jagdeep Singh. Oh, we are online, thank you, who will be joining us electronically online. And we have a leave of absence, no leave of absence, but apologies from Councillor Aringo of Peace Ward. Declarations of financial and proximity interests and interests affecting impartiality. We have Councillor Dawn declared an impartiality interest in item 14.3.6, which is the proposed Bram Stage 3 local structure plan, Lot 822 on Yuledean Road, Bram, Swan SP 2024/1. And as she made a submission via the City of Swan's website. We had Councillor Henderson declared an impartiality interest in item 14.3.6, a proposed Bram Stage 3 local structure plan, Lot 822 Yuledean Road, Bram, Swan SP 2024/1, as his wife made a submission on the item. Councillor Bowman declared an impartiality interest in item 16.1, which is the CEO Performance Review 2024, as he was one of the 11 councillors that provided a response to the performance review of the CEO. Councillor Miles declared an impartiality interest in item 16.1, which is the CEO Performance Review 2024, as he also provided feedback to the independent consultant who was conducting the review about the CEO's performance. Mr Stephen Kane, the CEO, declared a direct financial interest in item 16.1, which is the CEO Performance Review 2024, as it relates to his annual performance review, remuneration and future performance targets. We also have a disclosure of interest from Councillor Henderson, and that's for the 14.3.2, the Dayton DCP, as his home is adjacent to land against the Dayton DCP. Thank you very much. I'll just hand that one back over. We also had a disclosure of interest from Councillor Howlett on 16.1, CEO Performance Review. She was formerly on the CEO review panel and have lodged a complaint against the CEO, so we'll put that one there, thank you. We have a disclosure of interest from myself, which is item 16.1, as I was on the CEO Performance Review and also gave feedback to the consultant on the review process. And that was the submission I made for the performance appraisal, there. And then we also have a disclosure of interest from Councillor Ian Johnson for item number 16.1 as well, which was the CEO Performance Review. That's an impartiality, as have provided feedback to Helen Hardcastle, who was the independent consultant. Thank you. Councillors, are there any other councillors who need to submit a declaration of interest?
Madam Mayor,
Councillor
just
Bowman.
a point of clarification. Councillor Henderson interest in 14.3.2. I don't think I heard you read out what interest he had. Indirect financial.
Thank you very much. I did. Yes, I was trying to just read through the writing. So it was item number 14.3.2, which was the Dayton DCP, and the nature of interest was direct financial. Thank you. Okay, and I'll just ask again, councillors, are there any other councillors that need to submit a declaration of interest? No? Okay. Is there a question, Councillor Johnson?
The interest declared by Councillor Henderson, was that a direct financial interest or an indirect financial interest?
Indirect financial.
Thank you.
And we move on to part 5, public question time. So questions and answers were recorded in the minutes of the meeting, and they may be summarised in accordance with the Local Government Administration Regulations of 1996. All questions received for this meeting have been answered and responded to and have been included in this schedule, and all questions will be published in the minutes of this meeting. Move to 5.1, answers to questions which were taken on notice. There were nil. And 5.2, questions relating to reports contained on the agenda. So 5.2.1 are questions of which due notice has been given and there were nil received. And 5.2.2, questions without due notice for items on the agenda only, and there were nil questions received also. Is there any member of the public wishing to ask a question on an item on the agenda? Is no one? No one in the gallery? Okay, thank you. 5.3, other questions to items not contained in the agenda. So 5.3.1, questions of which due notice have been given. Mr. Richard James, relating to city document erosion control and stormwater management, which was AUS spec 1/WA-D7 February 2002. And Mr. James had 4 questions answered in which they've been emailed to him, and they'll be in the minutes of this meeting. We have Ms. Mary Despot. Ms. Despot had 4 questions answered in which they've been emailed to her, and they'll also be in the minutes of this meeting. 5.3.2, questions without due notice, and Mr. Richard James has registered to ask questions. If you'd like to please come to the podium, Mr. James. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My questions relate to the questions that I've already submitted and have received answers for, but I've been advised that the new document that's utilised by the City of Swan is the local government guidelines for subdivisional development. So my questions are relating to that. With regard to that particular document, in particular, erosion control and stormwater management, which department within the City of Swan is responsible for checking compliance against these guidelines in the document?
Thank you. Mr. van der Linde.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Those requirements will be looked at subdivision application stage, and the asset management business unit will, in the first instance, in assessing the subdivision application, identify the appropriate conditions and recommend those to be included in the subdivision conditions to the statutory planning business unit. The statutory planning business unit will then include those conditions in a recommendation to the WAPC, who is responsible for the issuing of the final conditions.
Thank you. What instigates a compliance check against any of the guidelines?
The receipt of a subdivision application in the first instance highlights the fact that it needs to be looked at. As I've explained, that will be looked at that stage by the assets business unit. And then the compliance is triggered in the first instance when the asset management team inspects the subdivision works on completion. That will be the first time where that is instigated.
Thank you. So if compliance checks are only carried out at the completion of the development, that implies that compliance checks are not carried out during works?
Madam Mayor, as I've said, I think the first instance is when the works is in progress, and normally at that stage where it reached the completion stage, they then get assessed. But there are other assessments made as well, and Mr. Coton can give more advice on that.
Thank you.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. As in addition to what Mr. van der Linde has outlined, during construction there are compliance checks that are undertaken. So there's inspection points, hold points, and test points that are assessed by staff as the construction is underway, as well as an inspection of the completion of the work.
Thank you very much. That's answered my questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. James. I'll ask, is there any other member of the public wishing to ask a question that's on an item not on the agenda tonight? There's not. Thank you. We move on to public statement time, and registration for public statement time at council meetings was required by 10 a.m. on Wednesday, August the 14th, 2024, and there were no registered statements to be made. And I move on to petitions. There were nil received. And deputations. All deputations for items on the agenda were heard at the agenda forum held on August the 7th, 2024. And tonight I have nil announcements to make this evening, so we move on to leave of absence. We have a form from Councillor Aringo for August the 12th, 2024 until November the 11th, 2024 inclusive. And councillors, we have a mover for that, Councillor Miles, and seconder, Councillor Bowman. Is anyone against? No, it's carried. And I'll ask, is there any other councillors requesting a leave of absence? No, if not, you've got some forms under your desk there just to fill out and pass up. And we have confirmation of minutes in part 11, confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on July the 10th, 2024, and 11.2, confirmation of minutes of special meeting of council that was held on July the 31st, 2024. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Bowman, and a seconder. Councillor Zanino, thank you. Is anyone against? That's carried. And move on to part 12, business left over from the previous meeting. If adjourned, there was nil, which brings us to part 13. And this is the adoption of those recommendations contained in the items that were not withdrawn. So for the benefit of the community members observing the meeting, council uses an en bloc method of decision making. And this means that the agenda items where the council supports the officer recommendation are not debated separately. One vote is taken on all of the items and the officer recommendation is therefore the decision of the council. And the following items have not been withdrawn for individual consideration and they'll be dealt with via the en bloc method. So therefore the officer recommendation will be the decision of council. 14.3.3, proposed amendment number 221 to local planning scheme number 17 to update the period of operation provisions of development contribution, area number 3, Caversham, DCA number 3, LPS 17 to 221. 14.3.4, consideration of submissions, amendment number 223 to local planning scheme number 17, and that's to modify the land uses allowed in precinct number 2 of the Rosehill Waters Special Zone, Use Zone number 24, South Guildford, LPS 17-223. 14.3.5, the proposed change of use from 6 grouped dwellings to use not listed, which is a private psychiatric hostel. And that's lot number 10, number 40, John Street in Midland, DA 324/24. We've got 14.4.1, which is the proposed dedication of land as road, and that's lot 9020 Marshall Road in Dayton. And 14.4.2, the proposed dedication of land as road, lot 12420 Brooklands Drive, Henley Brook, which is Crown Reserve 43914. 14.4.3 is Club Night Lights program, the 2025-26 funding applications. 14.5.1, which is the financial management report for the period ended 31st of May 2024. And 14.5.2, which is list of accounts paid May 2024. So there's quite a list there. Can I please have a mover?
Madam Mayor, before you just proceed, could I simply note that item 14.3.5 is the subject of an alternate recommendation tonight. It has been inadvertently left in your list, so we have an alternative there from Councillor Johnson.
Okay, that was 14.3.5. Thank you. Okay, so can I have a mover, please? Mover, Councillor Zanino, and a seconder. Councillor Jones, is there anyone against? No, so that's carried. We move on to 14, reports withdrawn for debate or an absolute majority vote are required. So the following reports have been withdrawn for debate in accordance with the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2023, and they'll be dealt with by council individually. So begin with 14.1.1. This is the draft policy, the leasing and licensing of commercial properties on page 7. And this is Councillor Howlett, your proposed motion.
Thank you. Right, 14.1. So my motion is that the council resolve to adopt draft policy 175, leasing and licensing of commercial properties, with the following changes to the policy. 4.1, requirements. F, all leases and licenses, including land leased or licensed to a charitable body, a not-for-profit organisation or a government organisation, will be advertised in accordance with the requirements of the Act, which allows for the following exemptions. 1, leasing of properties to a medical professional. 2, a licence to use land non-exclusively for a period of less than 2 years. And 2, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to make any formatting, nomenclature or other minor changes to the policy during this period of currency. And the reason for my motion is to provide greater transparency to Council and the community of the City's lease arrangements and occupancies of its commercial properties, where it pertains to ensuring the City's properties are appropriately optimised and maintained in accordance with the City's strategies.
Thank you, Councillor Howlett. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Johnson? Councillor Howlett, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Is there anyone opposing?
Is anyone against? Question, Councillor Bowman?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Is there a requirement under the Act to advertise land lease to charitable body or not-for-profit?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Travascus.
Section 3.5 of the Act requires advertising before leasing a property, but there are exemptions in the regulations, and one of those exemptions does include a charitable, not-profit and government organisation.
Okay. So my follow-up question then is this recommendation now ambiguous because we're including the land lease or licence to a charitable body or not-for-profit in accordance with the requirements of the Act, but the Act says you don't have to do it?
Thank you. Through you, Mr CEO.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct, but there would be a very simple modification you could make to this alternative, and that after the words where will be advertised, if you inserted where required, in accordance with the requirements of the Act. That way, the Act does require certain aspects to be advertised, and it doesn't require these others, but it would still have noted that it was consistent with the requirements where required of the Act.
And then my third question is, if this was to be passed, is commercial leases or licences for leasing of property to a medical profession or for less than 2 years going to be excluded, but those leased or licensed to a charitable body for medical profession or less than 2 years will be advertised?
That is the correct interpretation.
So therefore, can I suggest to the mover that perhaps some changes need to be made to make it, 1, less ambiguous, and 2, uniform for both charitable and not charitable organisations?
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. As the mover?
I think Councillor Bowman could have contacted me through the week to have this discussion. I'm not prepared to make a change on the fly, no.
Thank you. So I'll ask if there are any councillors who'd like to speak against the motion. Councillor Bowman. Councillor Howlett, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure, just very briefly, that the community would benefit, should they wish to know, the who, what and when of all the City's leases and licences of the commercial properties, including not-for-profit, charitable bodies and government organisation. Transparency is golden to the community's perception in the City of Swan.
Thank you. The seconder?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, this motion adds something to the requirements of the Act, and we can add additional things to our policies and procedures. So what we're doing here is adding advertising for land leased or licensed to a charitable body, land leased or licensed to a not-for-profit organisation, and land leased or licensed to a government organisation. So we're quite within our rights to do that, and I think that's what this is about. It's fairly clear. The Act allows for the following exemptions: leasing a property to a medical professional. Well, we're leaving that as it is defined in the Act. So in the interest of transparency, I'd encourage councillors to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I'll ask, does anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Madam Mayor, as you would be aware, we received the run sheet yesterday. By the time I got to it, I had no chance to actually speak to Councillor Howe early in the week. Policies. Policies are there to guide the staff. This is our direction to staff of what we want to see. When a policy is ambiguous, as in this policy now is, it creates a bit of a problem for staff when some councillors think that policy means one thing and other councillors mean another thing. I was quite simply trying to remove the ambiguity of this policy with these changes, but obviously the mover of the motion didn't want to do so. Councillors, I'm confused of now what's being advertised and what's not being advertised. Is leasing of a property to a medical profession that is a charitable body now exempt or not exempt by this policy? Now that's one thing. What happens when staff read it one way and a councillor who's moved this motion thought it was going to be another way? Councillors, it's critical that we take any ambiguity out of policy and not replace it with ambiguity as we're doing in this motion. I foreshadow the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I'll ask, is anyone for the motion? Is there Councillor Catalano?
Thank you. I think this is an express direction from council, and I think it's fairly clear. And in the case of a doctor's surgery that's a charitable trust, then because they are a charitable body, they would be captured by this provision. So I really don't see any ambiguity in this at all. This is clear that it includes land leased and licensed to a charitable body, a not-for-profit, or a government organisation. And that is a direction that basically is given to the staff by this council in its policy making. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. I'll ask, is anyone against the motion? Is there anyone for the motion? If not, I'll put it to the vote. Sorry, right of reply, Councillor.
Nothing further to add, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour of the motion? So, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Podovnik, Councillor Singh, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, that's him, and those against is Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson and myself. So the motion is carried, 7-6. Thank you. So we move on then.
Just check on that.
Yep.
7-6. We've got 14 here. 8-6, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
I've got
6,
7,
8,
6.
6.
You have 8?
Oh, it's 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 6.
Is that correct?
8,
8,
6.
6. Thank you, it's carried 8-6. And move on then to item 14.1.2, which is the policy review, property investment on page 13. Councillor Bowman, your proposed motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I move that Council resolves to 1, adopt revised policy POLC 157, property investment, with the following change to 3.4 reporting, and that would be 3.4 reporting to manage the progress of commercial activities. Reporting will be undertaken through the corporate system to the executive team and via an annual report to the audit committee. And then 2, that the chief executive officer be authorised to make any formatting or other minor changes to the policy during the period of this currency. So purely just adding, Madam Mayor, that the red that was on the screen.
Thank you very much. Do I have? Yep, that was going to read the paragraph.
The reason was that the Audit Committee's function includes the oversight of financial performance. The committee already receives reports on the investments undertaken by the city. The agenda and minutes of this committee are copied to all council members.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Miles? Anyone against? Councillor Howlett, do you wish to debate it?
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Waiving his right, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Seconder, Councillor Miles.
Councillor Miles, do you wish to speak? No? Is there anyone against? Sorry, you waive your right as well, did you?
Are we going to debate it if the mover doesn't want to debate? Do we still debate? Is that?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yep, I'll just briefly say why I'm against it, because I have got an alternate motion as well. However, my alternate motion brings it to the brings the quarterly briefing to the council in line with the same briefing the executive management team get, and the reason that I think that is better is because all councillors make a decision on the purchasing or the disposal of the city's property, and more information is better than less information. So if we were to keep up to speed with the quarterly knowledge that the executive team have, it would assist us when it comes to making those decisions, probably expedite them a lot quicker.
Thank you, Councillor Howlett. I'll ask, does anyone like to speak for the motion? Does anyone like to speak against the motion? Not? I'll put that to the vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Road Reply, Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, quarterly reporting, as Councillor Howlett had indicated. Madam Mayor, there's only been 6 properties sold and 2 acquisitions since July 2021. So I'm not sure what we'll be hearing from the staff in these briefing sessions on a quarterly basis. And reminding councillors, we struggle to find a time period for briefings. Adding more briefings, is that a good decision making? Important that all councillors make a decision. Well, at a briefing, we don't make decisions at briefings. So the value of all councillors making a decision, I don't see that as a point. However, Madam Mayor, audit committees have an oversight role. And by getting a report annually, where we might see 1 property, maybe 2 properties in that year, is a way for this council to actually get that information and have that oversight role.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? So Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Podovnik, Councillor Singh and myself. And those against? Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett. Carried 10-4, thank you. Okay. And so we're moving through to 14.3.1, which is proposed amendment number 219 to local planning scheme number 17 to update the period of operation provisions of development contribution area number 1, Brabham DCA number 1, LPS 17-219 on page 25. Councillor Catalano, an alternative?
Sorry.
You can make an amendment.
It's an amendment. Yep. It would be probably better if I could, Madam Mayor, that someone moves the officer's recommendation.
Thank you.
And Councillor Catalano then moves her amendment.
No problem. So I'll ask for a councillor. Thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Second.
To move the officer's recommendation. Seconded by Councillor Miles. Thank you. And now, thank you, Councillor Catalano. Sorry? Yes.
Yep.
So my amendment is, so we're going to adopt the officer's recommendation and Point 6, note that the matter of the extension of Hennybrook Avenue has yet to be determined by Council, and accordingly, subject to such a decision, Developer Contribution Area Number 1 and the Bram Developer Contribution Plan may need to be subject to further proposed amendment by Council.
Councillor, they wish to include it.
Councillor Bowman, is that acceptable?
Madam Mayor,
move as
before
well.
I say yes or no, can we have officers' comments on this since we haven't got it in our run sheet, please?
Thank you. I'll ask if you can. Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, that alternate marginal addition is perfectly ordinary and logical because it merely speaks to what would naturally transpire, that if the council subsequently at any forum makes a decision not to extend Henley Brook Avenue, as it is provided for in this DCP, then consequently it will be necessary for council to pursue the amendment to the scheme and the DCP. So it follows as the natural consequent requirement of any subsequent potential decision of council not to extend Henley Brook Avenue.
Councillor Bowman,
Based on advice from the Manager of Planning, then I'm happy to accept.
happy to accept. And seconder? Happy to accept, thank you. So this then becomes part of the substantive motion. Is there anyone against? And that's carried. Okay. And then,
14.3.2. And we've got Councillor.
so we move to 14.3.2, which is the proposed amendment for number 220 to the local planning scheme number 17 to update the period of operation provisions of development contribution, area number 2 for Dayton, DCA number 2, LPS 17-220 on page 32. Councillor Bowman. You're moving, thank you. So this was withdrawn for debate by Councillor Catalano, and Councillor Bowman has now foreshadowed the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Miles, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. My amendment is at point 6. Note that the matter of the extension of Henley Brook Avenue has yet to be determined by Council, and accordingly, subject to such a decision, Development Contribution Area Number 2 and the Dayton Development Contribution Plan may need to be subject to further proposed amendment by Council.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman, is it?
Before I accept, can I just get advice from the Manager that would be the same advice as what he said previously?
Thank
He's
you.
shaking his head. I'm happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
I'm happy to accept.
Councillor Miles, happy with that? Thank you. Is anyone against? No? And that's carried. I'll just wait one moment. So grab it. Thank you. Yeah, just checking what's going through. I haven't missed anything.
And you just need to let Councillor Henderson know when he comes back in that what the decision was.
It was carried. It was carried.
It was carried 13-0 with the additional amendment for point 6.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. So that motion was carried 13-0 plus the additional point 6. Then we move on to 14.3.5, which is the change of use from 6 grouped dwellings to use not listed as private psychiatric hostel. Lot number 10, which is number 40 John Street in Midland, DA 324-24 on page 71. Proposed motion, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My motion is that Council resolve to 1. Grant temporary approval for the proposed change of use in accordance with Clause 72 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulation 2015, subject to the following conditions. 1. This approval is restricted to Rashana Pty Limited and is valid for a period of 12 months only from the date of issue, whereupon the approval expires and the use must cease unless further approval has been obtained. The operation of the proposed development by any other person or on any other land is not permitted. This approval cannot be transferred to any other person without the prior approval of the City of Swan. 2. The use of the land by Roshana Pty Limited for a private psychiatric hostel is limited as follows. A maximum occupancy of the premises shall be limited to 30 residents, and B, access and egress from the property by residents, visitors and staff is by arrangement of Roshana Pty Limited. 3. Prior to occupancy of the development, the applicant owner is to submit to the satisfaction of the City of Swan an operational management plan for approval. The operational management plan is to contain details of the following. A, staffing arrangements. B, list of day-to-day activities conducted on site. C, length of stay of residents. D, security measures to be implemented. E, management of access and egress by residents, staff and visitors. F, noise management and mitigation measures. G, smoke drift management and mitigation measures. H, procedure for managing and dealing with complaints, inclusive of a quarterly meeting between Roshana Pty Limited and City of Swan representatives in conjunction with the community representatives selected by the City to review the operational performance of the facility. And I, waste management. J, whereafter the approved operational management plan is to be implemented and maintained for the life of the approval to the satisfaction of the City of Swan. 4. Refuse bin areas adequate to service the development must be provided to the satisfaction of the City of Swan prior to occupation or use of the development. 5. External lighting shall comply with the requirements of AS 4282, control of obtrusive effects of outdoor lighting. 6. The parking of vehicles in association with the private psychiatric hostel must be contained within the subject lot. 7. The private psychiatric hostel activity must not cause nuisance or degrade the amenity of the neighbourhood in any way, including by reason of the emission of noise, light, vibration, electrical interference, odour, fumes, smoke or other pollutant, vapour, steam, soot, ash, dust, wastewater, waste products, grit, oil or impacts on public safety or otherwise. 8. Any additional development which is not in accordance with the application, the subject of this approval, or any condition of approval will require further approval of the City of Swan. My reason for the motion is the reason for changing the officer recommendation so as to grant the approval on a temporary basis is to provide capacity to evaluate the performance of the proposed facility in integrating with the surrounding residential environment without adversely impacting on its amenity.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Howlett. I'll ask, is there anyone against? Councillor Henderson, do you wish to debate it? No? Does anyone wish to speak for or against? Councillor Miles? Councillor Miles, would you like to speak for the...
Yeah, I'll just quickly say...
Just a moment. Don't I speak first?
Sorry, yes you can. If you could just speak to it.
Thank you. Councillors, residents of John Street are opposed to a second psychiatric hostel, primarily because of an increased apprehension of an unsafe pedestrian environment in John Street because of their experience of the residents of the existing psychiatric hostel. As it says in the report, the 17 objections were on the grounds of perceived potential for antisocial and criminal behaviour by occupants of the proposed change of use, and I refer you to page 71. Residents of John Street have long experience of living in the same street as a hostel, and they are clear they do not want another hostel. This is not an unfounded fear of change. The residents understand the impact on their street. I'd like to give you a recent example. So on Sunday afternoon, I went along to John Street just to refresh my memory of the relationship between the aged care facility and Honeybrook Lodge. As I was looking around John Street, I found someone on the public footpath staring at me, probably wondering what I was doing. But when I looked back, councillors, I noticed the gentleman was not wearing any trousers. I drove off, and when I returned a few minutes later, I saw the same person entering Honeybrook Lodge. You would not want this kind of thing in your street. The concerns of the John Street community are based on lived experience. I initially decided to oppose the change of use. However, after speaking with the city planning staff, I was persuaded to change my alternate motion to an approval limited to 12 months duration only. If the owners wish to continue their use, they need to submit another development application in 12 months' time. The management plan scope has been extended in the alternate motion to include a procedure for dealing with complaints and a quarterly meeting between Roshana Management, City of Swan representatives and community representatives from John Street. My reason for changing the officer recommendation so as to grant approval on a temporary basis is to provide capacity to evaluate the performance of the proposed facility in integrating with the surrounding residential environment in John Street without adversely impacting on the amenity of John Street. If over the next 12 months the hostel impacts adversely on the amenity of the surrounding residential environment, then evidence to this effect will be available when it comes back to Council and will inform our decision at that time. So for these reasons, councillors, please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Does anyone want to speak against the motion? Sorry, the seconder, Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. I don't need to add any more to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Henderson.
Councillors, if you give a 12-month approval, you might as well just give an approval because you've created the precedence, and usually once that's done, it's all over. But I'm opposing this for a couple of reasons. I asked the proponents at the agenda forum when they had what the process was, and the process was that they applied for a group dwelling, and then it's not even finished, and they want to change the use. The residents that I spoke with, were very unhappy about that because they may well have been much more vocal about the application in the first instance if it was going to be for this particular purpose. So in that regard, I think the residents have got a good argument and they should be heard, and I'll be happy to support the residents on this one. I think the concept of the building is pretty much like a jail. It's all locked up. I get all that. But the stories I've heard from the residents are pretty serious, some of which have been announced by Councillor Johnson. So they have an expectation within their local community, and I'm prepared to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. I was asking anyone like to speak for the motion. Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support Councillor Johnson's motion right now, but I will just like to reiterate to my fellow councillors and to Councillor Johnson that we should be very careful when we're having these kind of conversations, because I think, as you mentioned in your speech, something about criminality and mental illness or psychiatric conditions does not equate to criminality, and I think we should be very careful about the words we use.
If you could just resume your seat.
I'm quoting
Councillor Johnson.
Yeah.
What's your point of order?
Basically, incorrect information. I'm actually quoting the stats report, page 71.
Just quote me the page,
final
please,
paragraph.
and the actual.
Page 71, final paragraph.
What was the actual reference? Thank you.
It says grounds in the report. It says grounds of perceived potential for antisocial and criminal behaviour by occupants. So that's in the report on
No, you
page
just need
71.
to quote me, please.
I've
where
just
in
quoted
the
it to you.
The page number.
I've said it 4 times now.
Yep, thank you. If you could
Page
just quote it
71.
No. Councillor Johnson, when you call a point of order, you must be ready to reference the point of order, please. So since your point of order is not ready, I'm going to dismiss that and ask Councillor Miles to continue, but to refrain from referencing that. Thank you.
Well, I'll just clarify my point. I think all councillors, when they're talking about this matter, these facilities are important no matter the local government boundary. And yes, people might have concerns and they're very valid and we should hear them out. That's why this motion is good in what it's trying to achieve. But we should be very careful when we're talking about, the psychiatric conditions of people and the care that they deserve in our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. I'll ask, is anyone against the motion? There's no one against the motion. I'll ask call. Is anyone for the motion? I'd like to speak for the motion. Councillor Podovnik.
Council, I would ask you to please support this motion. I've done quite a bit of work on it during the week. It's been an interesting one. I think Councillor Johnson's final motion is a great compromise. Instead of just approving it, Councillor Johnson's motion allows more oversight. It allows residents' concerns to be heard, and it allows Roshana to address those concerns. In effect, we've got city representatives, the proponent, and residents all working together to address any issues and ensure that the proper management can take place so that neighbours aren't negatively impacted in any way. I sent a lot of questions into Roshana this week, and they've taken a lot of care to answer them and reassure all of us that they're making this a safe facility. It will be gated, it'll be staffed. But most importantly, they are able to accommodate this motion, and this motion does support the residents. It also supports vulnerable members of our community, and it's not problematic to Roshana. So I would ask Council to please support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brodovnik. I'll ask, is anyone against the motion? If there's someone against the motion, your right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think there's any need to respond. Thank you.
Thank you. Those in favour? So Councillor Dawn, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Brodovnik, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Singh and myself, and those against, Councillor Bowman, yep, and Councillor Henderson. Thank you. So it's carried 12-2. Thank you, councillors. And then we move on to 14.3.6, which is the proposed Brabham Stage 3 local structure plan. Sorry, my apology.
I'm just being advised Councillor Catalano didn't vote.
Did you put your hand up at all? No.
So, can I just point out?
Thank you.
Through the chair, the Local Government Act requires councillors present at a meeting to vote. So it's not a case whether you want to or not. You have to vote one way or the other on the item.
Well, I didn't hear you call that out, so I'm voting against.
I definitely called for the vote, and everyone raised their hand for
Well, I didn't
against.
hear you.
Well,
Thank
it was
you.
definitely called. Through you, Mr. CEO.
I'd suggest you take the vote again, Madam
Thank
Mayor,
you.
to be sure that everyone is properly voting.
Right, I'll call that vote again. Those in favour of the motion: Councillor Dawn, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Brodovnik, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Singh and myself. And those against: Councillor Catalano, Councillor Bowman and Councillor Henderson.
And Councillor Catalano?
Was against.
Yes.
So 10-4?
Carried 10-4.
Oh, hang on, wait. You've got just 3 gets worked out. 11-3.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry, carried 11-3. Thank you very much. We'll move on to 14.3.6. Councillor Bowman.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move suspension of the City of Swan meeting procedure local law under section 13.1, that only so much of the meeting procedure local law section 8.8 duration of speeches be suspended to allow councillors to speak for no more than 5 minutes each, and for closing debate to not exceed 5 minutes on item 14.3.6. And the reason, due to the complexity of item 14.3.6, more time will be needed for debate and details.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henderson. Is anyone against? No? Carried. So we move back to 14.3.6, which is the proposed Brabham Stage 3 local structure plan on lot 822 Yuldean Road, Brabham, Swan SP 2024/1, page 103. Proposed motion, Councillor Catalano. Would you like to read out your alternate motion?
That the council resolve to recommend, 1, recommend that the WA or Western Australian Planning Commission do not approve the proposed Brabham Stage 3 local structure plan, and 2, advise the WAPC and those that made a submission on the proposed local structure plan of council's recommendation. Reason for the motion: the loss of over 2,000 mature, and if you could just put in there native trees, please. Native trees will have an unacceptable negative impact on Perth tree cover, thereby reducing the future climate resilience of the Perth metro area, and the loss of over 2,000 mature native trees from swampland, melaleuca and flooded gums, marri and Eucalyptus todiana, coastal blackbutt, habitat trees and threatened Bankshire bushland will have an unacceptable negative impact on the viability and sustainability of biodiversity in the northern Perth metro. Yes. Yep. Yeah.
So I'll probably at this point of time.
Thank you. And also recommend to councillors as well. Councillors, before we pursue this further, I just want to remind councillors that during the week and last week, councillors may have been given a tour of Bram Stage 3 with community members. At this point, there's an opportunity to put in a disclosure of interest if you were party to part of the tour, and I could recommend that you fill in a disclosure of interest form and hand that up to the CEO.
So, I don't sorry, excuse me, Mayor.
Yes, question.
Why do we need to do that for?
Through you, Mr. CEO.
Is that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It comes back to the nature of impartiality. If it could be perceived that you were going through with and forming a view with one particular party to influence an outcome for a decision tonight that may have swayed you one way or the other, that was outside of the formal public consultation process. So the tour you went through wasn't part of the consultation that was undertaken by staff, then it may affect your impartiality in decision making. So the Mayor is simply advising that she went on such a tour and therefore is declaring an impartiality consideration in this. Were it to come back, for instance, and the matter be challenged in the Supreme Court from an agreed party that you were subject to influence by parties prior to decision making and you had failed to make that declaration, there are other issues of case law, Dane and Serpentine Jarrahdale from memory, where a planning decision was overturned for that reason because the members failed to make the appropriate declaration of impartiality. So on the abundance of caution, the Mayor is choosing to make such a declaration, and that's why she's giving general caution to the other members here tonight.
So, through you, Councillor Bowman.
Question then. Every phone call that I receive from any person with a planning item, should I also be declaring an impartiality interest? Because that would be, in my opinion, the same thing. So, for example, John Street, I had phone calls, like I expect every other councillor did as well. Should we have declared impartiality interest on that? When I go to visit a application and the neighbours asked me to come and have a look because there might be an overshadowing fence from a illegal swimming pool, do I then put an impartiality interest? And then my third question is, am I correct that impartiality interests are not mandatory to disclose, but purely advising those members of the public and other councillors that you may or may not know a little bit more about something? And unless I've given a commitment to any person that I went on a tour with that I'd vote one way or another, have I not had any impartiality interest?
So all good questions, Councillor Bowman, and I'll just ask for some advice from the CEO, and I'm just putting it there, purely putting it there, and I'll ask the CEO. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. If you just give me a minute, Madam Mayor. So I'm just turning to the Local Government Model Code of Conduct Rules of Conduct Regulations 2021 on the issue of disclosures of interest. And I'm coming to the interest in impartiality. It means an interest that could or could reasonably be perceived to adversely affect the impartiality of the person having the interest. So it comes to the interpretation if it's reasonably perceived to affect the impartiality. So if you're going on a private tour as opposed to that's been specifically arranged by a party to help facilitate or try and sway you for decision making, not just talking to residents, The Mayor is saying out of an abundance of caution she's making such a declaration in order that if the decision were challenged as to why she undertook this, it wasn't part of the other consultation process. Now, in the course of general consideration of items, you have received correspondence from the Department of Education, you received correspondence from the Development WA, you received correspondence, I think, from CLE Pete that has been generally circulated to all members. But they were generally circulated to all members. I don't know, Councillor Bowman, in terms of the other contacts that have been held by individuals coming back on any item, whether that was generally provided to all parties. So I'm coming back. If it's reasonably perceived it could have affected your impartiality in decision making, that's why you make such a declaration. It then obviates any need for consideration that you may have breached the provision of that Act. Now, I don't know the nature of the tour the Mayor went on. I don't know who did it, but she is out of an abundance of caution providing that declaration.
Question, Councillor Howlett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering why this hasn't been raised earlier, because there have been many occasions. For example, the extractive industries in Gidgigana, we were invited to attend, and some councillors attended the site. Rose Hill Estate was another item that some councillors have gone to visit, that lodge with the developer to have a look at it with them. So I'm just curious as to why this has come about now, following on from Councillor Bowman's question about ordinary meetings with the public who wish to give us their side of things.
Well, just particularly from my perspective, I suppose sitting in this role as the Mayor, I would feel that I would want to declare that, particularly with this item. I hadn't attended the clay extract or the Rose Hill Waters development, so I probably would have, sitting in this position, if I'd also done those. It's entirely up to you personally. I just wanted to let you know that that's what I'm doing, and that's where I have given everyone else the opportunity if they feel that they need to. It's entirely your own personal choice. Councillor Dawn.
I'm not too sure why about that. I consider this just an historical field trip with some local community members.
Yep. That's fine.
I can't see why that was impartial
and
whatsoever.
You don't need to. That's your own personal view. I'm just letting councillors know that was my decision. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to the CEO. So what you say, Mr. CEO, is that information gathering is an interest in section 22(1)(a), where interest means an interest that could reasonably be perceived to adversely affect the impartiality of the person. So information gathering, which is what we do as councillors, is an interest. Is that what you're saying?
To you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you. No, that's not what I'm saying. In fact, it's up to council members to inform themselves before they make a decision. However, the nature of any information or guidance or advice that's given to you that may be perceived to have impacted your impartiality is where the individual makes that declaration. So in this case, I'm presuming, I don't know the nature of what Mayor Richardson undertook, but she is saying that she does not want to be in a position that subsequent to any consideration of this tonight, someone might come back and said, you had this particular private tour that was facilitated to advocate one particular way or the other, and could be perceived to impact her impartiality. Councillors, each decision you make, it's your own declaration of impartiality you make, and it's the judgment then on that you make against yourself, unless somebody obviously lodges a complaint under the Local Government Standards panel.
Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, did you come to this understanding yourself that you would be declaring an impartiality, or have you come to this with guidance from the CEO that suggests that perhaps you could consider that?
No, that just came to me as I was sitting here about to listen to this really important item, and then went, well, hang on, I'm sitting in a different position now from what I was as a councillor, and it dawned on me, and I went, oh, you know what, I need to declare this. So it's personal, nothing to do with the CEO's advice, my own personally. That's why it's come at the last minute, and I'm giving you all the opportunity if you choose to go that way or not. There's nothing to read into it. I just declare that there was a tour of information both sides, and that I'm just letting you know that that's what happened, and that's where I'm going to direct that. So I've now received a disclosure of interest from Councillor Henderson, item 14.3.6, which is the Bram Stage 3 structure plan, additional, that he also undertook review of the local area with respect to the application.
Question.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I've got a question. I visited the site on my own and I looked over the fence. Could that be considered to be an interest?
Through you, Mr. CEO.
So coming back to the provision, unless you have taken something that could be perceived to adversely affect the impartiality of the person, you don't have an interest. I would suspect going out, Councillor Johnson, on your own, looking over a fence, as you might do with any other item, is not going to be perceived to impact your impartiality. If you went with somebody else who was trying to point out certain things to you in a particular way, then that might be perceived to impact your partiality on the issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. I'm going to move back. My apologies for that delay. Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. So this structure plan...
Just ask about seconder. Sorry. Do I have seconder?
We haven't had the reason for the motion yet, have
we? You did get to the end of that. Thank you.
I couldn't remember exactly.
That's right. And seconder was Councillor Howlett. Thank you. Councillor Catalano. Thank you. So, councillors, is there anyone against? Thank you. Do you wish to debate it? Thank you, Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. This structure plan reminds me of the Farrell Road Midvale structure plan nearly 10 years ago. Same proponent and environmental consultant. A bush forever site cut off, a wetland reported to no longer exist, destroyed, Banksia and threatened ecological community and black cockatoo habitat lost forever. Council approved with conditions, but subsequently that wasn't upheld by the WAPC, as quenders were run over in Stratton and Middle Swan. Approval by the city, but ultimately it could not enforce its conditions. It was a terrible environmental outcome, but the scale is small fraction compared to that of the Bram 3 structure plan, which, if it goes through, in my opinion, will be the worst environmental disaster in the city of Swan this century. This structure plan does not follow state guidelines. The Department of Biodiversity, DBCA, in their letter to council say there are 2 wetlands classified as resource enhancement, which means partially disturbed priority wetlands which still support important values. The management object is to restore and protect, not destroy, and DBCA does not support the reduction in size of the wetlands and recommends buffers of 50 metres between the wetlands and urban development. The proponent has not even provided DBCA with evidence that the wetlands no longer exist. I have tried for a compromise, but even if 50% of the 2,000 mature native trees are retained, that leaves over 1,000 mature native trees, black cockatoo habitat and food and threatened Banksia woodland to be destroyed. Still the worst environmental disaster of this century. Even if 90% of the trees are retained, that still leaves 200 to 300 mature native trees to be sacrificed, and I can't approve the loss of even that many trees in all good conscience. Ultimately, Bram 3 is an outdated concept. We can't be locked into an outdated concept, planned when Banksia woodlands were not endangered. Tonight, we have to make a decision according to what we face now, not as things were 30 or 40 years ago. Cutting down thousands of mature native trees on the Swan coastal plain is no longer an option. There just isn't enough bushland left. And what about the hundreds, if not thousands, of kangaroos, birds, reptiles, marsupials, invertebrates that will be displaced, hit by cars, shot or bulldozed in a spectacle of carnage previously witnessed in Bram? People need homes, but people also need nature. The clearing of bushland should not and cannot happen. Council should not approve it. I urge you to send a clear message to the WAPC about the urgent need to protect our natural environment now And only by voting no to this structure plan tonight can you do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. Councillor Hallett is the seconder.
Thank you. Councillors, we have a strategic community plan which establishes the community's vision for our future, including aspirations of service and expectations. And I'd like to read from this. Under the title Emergent Themes, which are there to guide the work we deliver to our community, the heading Sustainable Growth. We are committed to economic growth and diversity balance with natural environment and heritage to ensure the city provides local services, industry access, local employment and diverse places to live. Under the heading Caring for Our Environment, the city is committed to caring for and protecting the environment and our history and our heritage. The community is proud of the city's beautiful natural environment, its bushland, open spaces, the Swan Valley, the Swan River, and its natural diverse beauty. And reading from the heading Natural Environment in our vision for 2031, under the heading N.1, Sustainable Natural Environment, the objective is N1.1, enhance, preserve and protect local ecology and biodiversity of natural ecosystems. That's all. We've got the vision there. It's in our strategic community plan. We should not be supporting the destruction of Bram Stage 3.
Thank you, Councillor Howlett.
I have through you, Madam Mayor, if I have a question.
Question, Councillor Podolny.
Just to staff, just so that I'm clear, from what I understand, approval has already been given to clear the site on a federal level. If this motion is supported, will it stop the clearing of the bushland, or what impact would it have?
Through you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, it's important to reiterate for everyone once again that the council here is not making a determination on the structure plan. It is merely making, well, let me rephrase that. I'll retract the word merely. I will say it is making a recommendation to the decision maker, which is the Commission. So if the council sees fit for any reason not to recommend that the Commission support the structure plan, the Commission will make that decision. And it's also very important to point out another salient fact, that since 2015, applicants, in this case the Department of Housing and Pete Bram Limited, would have a right of appeal against any decision of the West Australian Planning Commission to refuse the structure plan. And those things would need to happen. And all they would do, that wouldn't change the nature of the federal approval. The federal approval doesn't say that the government, the West Australian Planning Commission, has to support the structure plan. Neither does it say that the council has to recommend to support the structure plan. That's the disposition of the facts of the various approval processes.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. I'll ask, is anyone against the motion? Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to start by foreshadowing the officer's recommendation that I'll move in the instance that Councillor Catalano's or Henderson's fails. Thank you to staff for reiterating that point, that ultimately the WAPC is the decision maker in this. And I think that's really important that all councillors remember that in their deliberations tonight. I definitely hear the concerns of the community and other councillors regarding the clearing of vegetation. I mean, I care particularly about the natural environment, as I'm one of the generation that will need to manage and mitigate the consequences of previous inaction on climate change and urban sprawl. However, I also understand that living through this economic struggle we're currently going through, and the cost and availability of housing being in dire straits, that this also particularly affects young people, and new families. We cannot simply say no to new housing when it's desperately needed and where it's been planned for decades. Now, I really do encourage councillors to have a constructive and respectful debate about this, because it's more important that we work with the state government to protect our natural environment through the processes that we do have input on, while also delivering housing and appropriate education infrastructure in particular that is so desperately needed. Because just saying no to the WAPC is not progressive, it's regressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. I'll ask, if anyone would like to speak for the motion. Does anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Councillor Miles and the Manager of Planning actually must have been looking at my notes. Councillors, we are only a referral agency. We are only recommending. Councillors, I don't agree with what's there in front of us. I think I've got some issues with some things, but we have to look at it holistically. Councillors, we know, one, Bram needs a high school. It needed a high school 5 years ago. This solves that problem. Councillors, we know in numerous reports there should have been an ecological link, a corridor. It doesn't allow for that in this application. Councillors, we know now where the Whiteman train station is. That's one of the reasons why this has been delayed. But this structure plan doesn't actually gel in with the train station because there's a piece of land between Isidine and Drumpelia. But councillors, if we go back to WPC and just say no, we lose all other opportunities. So we should be saying to them, what don't we like? What do we like? We should be working with that. Councillors, the motion in front of you loses our chance to preserve the raw where was it, the Verticordia lidialis species. We're saying we don't want to do that because that's what this motion is saying. Councillors, we need to be careful when we say no, because what happens, and we've seen it time and time again, whether we like it or not just in this local government but other local governments, the WAPC through the minister, and whether it's Labor or Liberal, I'm wearing my purple hat at the moment, they both will not listen at times when you completely say no. But if we try to work with them to say, these are the things we really do not like, these are the things that are okay, and these are the things we'd like to see, well, maybe we might get a better outcome. Now, Madam Mayor, I went on a fantastic tour. I didn't declare an interest because I haven't got an apprehended bias, because in that tour, I didn't say which way I was going to vote, yes or no. I've also spoken with the State Manager of Pete, because I've actually wanted to ask for information. We had a great chat. I don't agree with everything that either of the parties said to me, but I took all that information on board to actually then look to see what I think is best for our community. And what the motion is in front of us, I can't support because I don't think it's the best for our community. But on the flip side, I don't think the officer's recommendation is the best for the community as well. So that's where I stand, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman, I'll ask, does anyone like to speak for the motion? Anyone against the motion? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, a lot of what I had in mind has been said, so I won't repeat it. Here's a little bit of history. Councillor Zanino wasn't there, Councillor Lucas isn't in the room any longer, nor Councillor Gregorini or Councillor Kidson for that matter. Let's go back to about 1997 or 8, somewhere around there. The Shire of Swan said to the planning minister at the time, no, we don't support development in the northeast corridor section, effectively where we're talking about now. And that went back to the minister, and the minister was pretty unhappy about that because he obviously wanted to progress the northeast corridor plan. A Liberal, by the way, and notice I've got a bit of grey on my tie tonight. It's not purple, it's sort of like in the middle. The point I want to make, sorry Mr Coden, the point I want to make is that the minister dragged the council, kicking and screaming, up to Doomer's house, sat us all down and read us the Riot Act. Guess what? After that, went back to council and it went through. Councillor Fairdig and I fought the fight over the water issues. We laid out all of those issues quite succinctly, and guess what? Well, we're seeing water issues today. We're seeing flooding coming out of the current peak development down through Woolcott. We've seen a rose garden farmer there, his whole crop flooded and wiped out. Those are the sort of things that concern us the most. And the point I want to come to, because time's going to be thin, the point I want to come to is that I have to be pragmatic on this. I don't actually want to approve this. I really don't, councillors. But we don't make the decision. What I want to happen is for us to look at the key issues, and my foreshadowed motion, I think, handles those key issues. And I think if we work through those following this motion, hopefully, we can get a better outcome for the overall development. That's really the key here, a better outcome. There are problems with the current proposal, and we've got to do our best to be able to resolve those for the community. I would just love to put my hand up and say no, but I know we will get a good hard kick in the teeth, and I don't think our community wants that, and certainly I don't. I think we do have to ask for a response on the issues that I've raised in my proposed motion, and in doing so I think that gives us at least an opportunity to say, okay, well, we've tried to resolve those. We may or may not be able to, but at least ways we can go back and try and resolve them, because they are reasonable and fair requests that we see as problematic with the current proposal. And given that they are fair and reasonable, there is no reason why they should be knocked back or refused. Just to cover another point that was raised about the high school. Yeah, we've been pushing for the high school for years, and suddenly, oh, we've got to have this high school now. Well, I'm sorry, that's not an excuse. I think it was Councillor Bryce Parry was asking questions time after time about getting that high school built in the northern parts of Bram, and it fell on deaf ears. Suddenly the Education Department, oh, we've got to have a school. And this is an excuse, if you like, to say, well, let's get on with this now. I'm sorry, I can't accept that. Councillors, I would urge you to refuse this motion. There's a middle ground, which is what I think we can achieve, that I'm proposing following this, and I seek your support to do that once we get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Henderson. I'll ask, does anyone like to speak for the motion? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I said earlier, councillors, I did drive around the site on my own, by the way, not with any property developers or any members of the community. And my purpose was to get a closer look. So I looked over the fence, and what I saw was pretty congruent with what I see in the report. What I saw was really pleasant open parkland in an area that obviously at one time was an airstrip. The trees were really rather substantial and were clearly habitat for the various species of black cockatoos that live in the area. It seems to me that the structure plan is not really taking an awful lot of notice of the trees on the site, and that a different structure plan would be possible that made use of the degraded land that was previously an airstrip for roads, and to carefully and selectively clear so that houses could be built amongst the trees. So you can have a really wonderful parkland development here. There's tremendous opportunity. And that's the reason I'm supporting Councillor Catalano's motion. I really do feel the developers should go away and have another go. They need to come up with a structure plan that responds appropriately to what is there on the site, which is a significant amount of degraded land, but some wonderful trees. So let's put the roads where the degraded land is. Let's put the houses among the trees, and this plan really is not in line with our currently out for advertising tree retention policy. So that's why I'm supporting Councillor Catalano's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I'll ask one last time. Is there anyone against the motion? If there's no one against the motion, I'm going to put the motion to the... Oh, right of reply. And I'm just going to get through it. Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. look, referral or not, this is your last chance to make a decision to protect the natural environment. Once these trees have been removed and the environmental values, the swamps filled in, and the habitat and the animals destroyed or they've gone or run over, there's no more decisions to be made by this council. That's it. It's done. You know, you might say that it's not progressive, right, to actually advocate for the protection of bushland, but actually, given where we are in the history of this state, it's actually the most progressive thing. Because I looked up the definition of progressive, and it means development towards an improved or more advanced condition. For 200 years, we've been knocking over trees and trashing the landscape. And it's got to stop. We've got to be working towards an improved or more advanced condition. And I'm sorry, but you may be able to mitigate it in 20 years' time, but I don't think so. You've got to mitigate now, because do you know why? There's nothing left, or almost nothing left. Have a look at that growth corridor. There will be nothing left. And how will Whiteman Park and how will the bush forever, in fact, how will the Swan Valley survive that kind of heating and that kind of environmental damage? You won't be able to mitigate it. So, right, what we've got is an issue about contemporary high school and amenities when I'm thinking long term, and it's about the survival of all of us. Forget the birds and animals, they've already gone. Our survival, our children's survival. You won't be mitigating it. It's already, this clearing cannot continue. It cannot happen, because once it does, goodbye bush forever, goodbye Whiteman Park, goodbye Swan Valley. Surrounded by effectively a desert, a sea of roofs and houses, people driving in and out. It's mayhem. It's mayhem. It is not working towards an improved or more advanced condition. It is absolute chaos. So tonight is your decision to make a decision about protecting the environment of the city of Swan. That's what you're here to do. Don't worry about the WAPC. The WAPC makes its own decisions. Don't worry about it. You're not here to consider what the WAPC will think of your decision. You're here to represent the community and the ratepayers of the city of Swan, and they must have the natural environment. We've got to have nature. People must have it. To thrive, to survive. You know it. Every one of you know it. Because people have been saying the same for the last 30 years, as Councillor Henderson points out. And he's not alone, because I've been there also. So, you know, you can put conditions on things, and as I've already pointed out tonight, conditions, when they get to WAPC, mean nothing. It's an approval. They just see it as an approval. It's the same with Henley Brook. Remember when that structure plan came to council? Oh, there was a whole big debate about whether we should include trees in it. When it got to the WAPC, after we approved it with these extra trees, guess what? It was taken as an approval and the trees were omitted. Don't worry about an approval with conditions. You've got to stand up right now for protection of the natural environment. This is your last chance. This is it. This is the last chance. And it really is the last chance. I mean, I've been around a long time and I've seen the amount of destruction that's gone on in this state, in the southwest of this state, and I can tell you it is absolutely catastrophic for your futures. And I'm not joking. And I'm not alone in saying that. There was a program on the television last night talking about bird habitat. Did you watch it? Did you watch it? She was saying exactly the same thing as I'm saying here right now. I'm not a crank. I'm actually being progressive. I'm asking you to stand up for the community. I'm asking you to stand up for the natural values, for nature that the community needs to thrive.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. Councillors, I'm now going to put this to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Johnson and Councillor Howlett, and those against, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Prodovnik, Councillor Singh, and myself. So the motion is lost. That's 6-8. Councillor Miles has foreshadowed the officer's recommendation. Oh, sorry, my apologies, Councillor Henderson. So we have a proposed motion by Councillor Henderson. If you'd like to please read out your alternate motion.
Councillors, I apologise, the motion is a couple of pages long. I move that Council resolve to 1. Note the proposed Bram Stage 3 local structure plan fails to encompass the land to the immediate west that adjoins Drumpelia Drive, fails to articulate the detail of connections to the new Whiteman train station, and so limits the plan as an effective instrument for orderly and proper planning. 2. Note the submissions made to the City on the proposed Bram Stage 3 local structure plan, particularly those submissions opposing the local structure plan on the grounds of adverse environmental impact from vegetation clearing, the elimination of an ecological link, and adverse impact of traffic. 3. Note that the proposed local structure plan has been designed on the assumption of the extension of the Henley Brook Avenue, that'll be road, through to Reed Highway, with the Aldine Road providing a road connection between Drumpelia Drive and an extended Henley Brook Avenue. 4. Note that the Council has not to date made any resolution to program the extension of Henley Brook Avenue south of Park Street. 5. Request further information from the proponent of the proposed structure plan in accordance with Clause 19(1)(c) of Schedule 2 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, that information being Roman numeral 1, A, brackets revised, traffic impact assessment of the proposed local structure plan based upon a scenario where Henley Brook Avenue is not extended southwards beyond a junction with Aldine Road. 6. That the proposed structure plan be modified where required to facilitate a scenario where Henley Brook Avenue is not extended southward beyond a juncture with the Aldine Road, inclusive of any required modifications to connections from the structure plan area to Aldine Road, and any required modifications to the proposed standard of internal connecting roads in addition to the following. A. The preparation of a kangaroo management plan for the local structure plan area to the satisfaction of the West Australian Planning Commission on advice from the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions. B. Modification to Structure Plan A, Structure Plan Map and Part 1, Implementation section as follows. Sorry about the frog in my throat. Areas designated as residential R50-R60 should be redesignated residential R80-R160. The 2 local reserves, recreation, that are referred to as Park number 3 and Park number 4 in Part 2, explanatory section being amalgamated to create a single park. The local reservation, recreation, that is referred to as Park number 5 in Part 2, explanatory section being notated to say reserved for conservation purposes investigation for incorporation into Bush Forever Site 200. An area of public space is to be designated as a local reserve recreation to encompass the location of the Verticordia lindii species identified in the middle of the subject land. The local reserve high school being notated to delineate the provision of an emergency access way along its boundary with Bush Forever Site 200. The structure plan map to clearly identify the existing surrounding cycle network and connections into and from the local structure plan area. C. Modify Part 2, explanatory section, including reports contained as technical appendices where relevant to reflect these modifications inclusive of an adopted kangaroo management plan and a modified local water management strategy that affirms the rate of stormwater discharge from the local structure plan area development is no greater than the rate of discharge pre-development in order to ensure surrounding native vegetation, in brackets Banksia woodland, is not flooded. 7. Advertise for a period of 42 days the notified proposed structure plan in accordance with clause 19(1)(d) of Schedule 2 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme Regulations 2015. And the reasons are in the motion.
All of them.
I need to read the motion again for the reasons.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bowman? Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. Okay. So Councillor Bowman was the seconder. Is there anyone against? Do you wish to debate it? Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Okay, councillors, a little bit of a history lesson beforehand. I think it's important to understand the history to be able to gather some information about how this should come together. If you go back to when the North East Corridor was developed, the local community expressed concern about bushland, as has been quite clearly enunciated by Councillor Catalano. Definitely not the only one that's concerned about all these trees being cut down, but guess what? That's already been approved, as it has been in all the areas around where I've seen acres and acres of trees have been flattened. To think that we can stop this now is just fanciful, I'm afraid. We can't do it. But when the community did come together and put in submissions to the then government, it was quite concerning to them, and they decided to undertake a study of their own about the local flora in particular in the region. And I think most of you have received a copy of this that I've handed around to councillors. If you haven't, I've got some more that I can get to you. The bottom line is that it is a record as of that date, around about 2098 through 2000. I just want to acknowledge former Councillor Zek, who's here with us tonight, for her contribution in that, along with the others in the community. We had Bevan Carter, Molly Edgecombe and Janet Garth. It is a record of so much vibrant bushland. It is so extensive that I think it outlines 242 different species of plants that were recorded in here, and only 47 of them, by the way, are introduced weeds, if you like, garden species and the like. So that's a little bit of history, and the point of doing this was to say, and these are in our libraries, by the way, the libraries received these, was to say to the government of the day, been put on notice, these issues exist, you need to have a good hard think about them when you move forward. Now, the fact of the matter is, governments have already said you can flatten those trees. At least we've had a win with the Bush Forever site, but the risks of it being flooded out are very real. My motion says we've got to address that very clearly, and so that's a little bit of history there. The other bit of history I outlined earlier about the local minister at the time telling us to get on with it. By the way, he was a Liberal. Anyhow, that's one of the big issues. The other thing that happened at the time was that there were considerable concerns, so much to the point where thousands of signatures were sought in petitions to the lower house and the upper house of Parliament. Those signatures were very, very, very clear about the impacts on what might happen in the area, and they sought to be able to resolve some of the long-term issues in planning. I'll just read this one to you. The proposed Perth to Darwin Highway, which is where Drumpillia is now, by the way, should remain. This is the. I'll tell you what it is. It's the 12th report of the Standing Committee for Constitutional Affairs and Statutes, June 1996. And the recommendations, one of which is the proposed Perth to Darwin Highway should remain at its present alignment along Lord Street, subject to an investigation as to whether this extension can be engineered to provide service to both regional and local traffic, thereby reducing the number of arterial roads running north-south in the northeast corridor, minimising the fragmentation of the area. That was a recommendation from the upper house of Parliament, to which it would seem that much has been ignored. So the key thing about that is thousands of signatures were issued on that one. So I've got a lot more to say. The other aspect is Albion Town, which you may or may not have seen. This was the beautiful glossy about Albion
Councillor
Town.
Henson, that was your 5 minutes. New extension.
I move for an extension.
Is anyone against?
How many minutes do you need?
I probably need another 4 or 5.
I'll say 5.
Is there anyone against? No, carried.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I really appreciate it, and thank you, councillors, for listening, because this is a very big issue for our area. And this lovely glossy was produced, which really sounded great. And lovely villages, some lakes with all that beautiful water, and keeping a lot of trees and waterways. We now see tens of thousands, literally tens of thousands of people living in well, it was called Albion Town, but it's Bram these days. So that's a little bit of history. One of the things about that, that, if you like, constrained it was the concerns around water in particular. Okay, so where does the structure plan fail? Well, it does not encompass land to the immediate west that adjoins to the Drumpillia Drive. That needs to be addressed, and we've asked for that in the motion. It doesn't detail the connection to Whiteman train station. Again, that's there. We see a serious segmentation of the bushland, the bush forever bushland, and that segmentation worries me considerably, because of the original plan. If you look at the original maps that were in that big document that was sent to us, was a very clear, concise green band all the way through. That's been chopped up by a railway line and Drumpillia, and is doing to some extent. Point is, though, it's not just ground level animals, it's birds as well. We need to have that green belt from literally from West Swan Road and the Swan Valley right through to Whiteman Park to be able to provide that corridor. It doesn't consider the need for Yildoon Road as 4 lanes. I was absolutely flabbergasted when I heard that Yildoon Road is only ever planned for 2 lanes. That just doesn't make sense to me when there's going to be so much traffic pouring down from the north and going up to the north. So I think that needs to be considered in terms of how the internal management of traffic is going to flow and how that traffic is going to exit the area, be it down Isadoon and down onto Drumpelia via a 4-lane roundabout that's being built there now. That provides a very clear possible traffic path. And because of the new proposed MRS 1421 to urbanise a whole stack of more of Whiteman Park, linking those two together and having an understanding of the connection of that, this development and that one, I think makes sense. Councillors, I think that the key issues have been raised here. The big one for me is that the Bush Forever site is going to be ultimately piece by piece destroyed if we do not very actively pursue a plan with the developer to improve how it all comes together so that we can ensure that long term we don't see that bushland wiped out, deteriorated to a point where the government says, well, no worries, it's our land, we'll just simply put housing straight through and just build Dayton straight up through into Bradman. I would be very disappointed if that ever happened. I'm hoping that we can work with the developers to improve that and to make sure that we don't have the land, like kids love a bit of bushland, don't they? Hop out of school, jump the fence, oh, let's light a fire for a campsite, and we have another fire. They're the kind of scenarios that worry me a lot, along with the impact, potential impact of water. Now, Councillor Catalano's motion having failed, I really would love to have supported it, but I can't. I couldn't, should I say. This is the compromise that I think we need. We do need to progress this with the developer to be able to get to a point where we can move forward and get a better outcome for our community. Thank you for listening, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Bram is the second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillors, just want to read out a little bit of a letter that we got from Dean Munford, CEO of Development West. Not everyone may have had the chance to read it. The development will also integrate Bradman with the soon-to-be-completed MetroNet Whiteman Park train station and provide site access plan for the Department of Education's planned high school construction. The timely support for this project at Wednesday night's council meeting is therefore crucial to support the state government's efforts to provide more access to new and affordable homes. Well, councillors, I'm not sure how Development West does it, but I don't think this structure plan as was is orderly and proper planning. The last Wednesday, the deputation, I asked about the land between Drumpelia and Isidon. Got questions on how we pronounce that. And although the structure plan tries to make it all sort of go to the train station, we don't know what will happen with that parcel of land. And that's a huge, huge issue for me, because there was a classic example, if I have seen one, where we could have had a Todd in that area. I congratulate the planning staff, where one of the modifications was to increase the designated area R50, R60 to R80, 160. They're saying it should be higher density because that's the closest part to the train station, but that parcel of land is right next door basically. But what that parcel of land also creates problems with is not knowing what's going to happen on the southern part. Is there going to be a wildlife corridor, the ecological link? Now, you read a lot of documentations in previous planning reports and all that, it talks about this ecological link. Now, Drumpelia Road's there, train lines there, makes it hard, but you develop that bushland in that site further south, and we have not got any chance of doing that. Councillors, the traffic impact statement is designed on Henley Brook Avenue going all the way through. Yes, it's in a lot of planning documentations that it's going to be there, but just remember, councillors, this council resolved to put on hold all works and land resumptions in relation to Henley Brook Avenue, south of Park Street, with the exception of traffic modelling, and immediately contact the Minister for Transport Planning for confirmation on the proposal and discussions recently held with community groups with regards to the future, and then upon receiving advice and so on. Councillors, Yuildene is going to look like Millhouse Road in Allenbrook. Millhouse Road, a road that I go on at least 6 times a day. Single lane, up to 17,256 cars in one section. A lot of roundabouts, very close together. A lot of intersections. Have we not learnt our mistakes of Allenbrook, the master plan community, when it comes to the interior main roads in development? We need to look at what happens if Henley Brook Avenue does not continue. I'm not saying if it is or isn't, but what happens if it doesn't continue? This structure plan is all about Henley Brook Avenue continuing. What Councillor Henderson's motion is saying is, well, let's just for a quick minute, let's think and go, what if it doesn't? How's it going to work? Is there a better way? Councillors, the motion from Councillor Henderson, and I know Councillor Dawn and myself were involved on working this one up. What we're saying is we think you can do a better job. But it's not all Pete's problem either. Because Pete probably would love to have that little parcel of land there to look at the whole structure plan. But they haven't got it. But does that mean we should miss out on a much better development for the City of Swan? Higher density near the train station. That's what's in a lot of government documents. But here we are at Whiteman Station.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. This is an extension of time.
1 minute.
Is there anyone against?
So here we are, thank you, councillors. Here we are, Whiteman Station, and we're losing that ability. Now, councillors, I said it before as well, we desperately need a high school in Bram. Yeah, it should have been planned earlier, but it wasn't. It's no different to the Allenbrook Pool. We should have done it earlier, but we didn't. So now we work on the best thing that we can get. Where else is it going to go? So we need to actually be able to work on that as well to get the best outcome for the community. I think Councillor Henderson's motion is the best outcome at the moment. Hopefully Pete can take it away, come up with some great ideas. Hopefully state Labor government is listening and saying, yes, we need to integrate that parcel of land to get the best outcome for our community.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Question, Councillor Hatt.
Hayden, yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could I please ask maybe the Mr. van der Linde about this particular motion and how effective it might be in achieving its goals compared to the officer's recommendation? Like, are we going to see our recommendations put into the plan? Is that something that happens with these submissions, considering I'm new, or is it just going to delay housing?
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Through you, Mr. van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, this motion proposes for the applicants to go away, prepare an alternate structure plan and bring it back to council after it's been advertised. Those implications will have to be assessed by council at that stage, and at that point the recommendation will be made to the commission. The regulations allow for the council procedurally to do that, but what we have to consider, and that is quite clear in our report, is that the current planning framework is in place, and such a resolution will essentially go against the framework, and that has been discussed by councillors so far as well. So therefore, in terms of whether, to answer your question, whether that will what the outcome of it will be, it's obviously not for me to say what the outcome will be. It will be determined by the assessment that's done, and at that point to see what the implications are, because the implications of a revised structure plan will be that it impacts the broader area. It's not only impacting the structure plan, it will impact what happens on the intersection of the proposed Henneybrook Avenue and Reed Highway. It will impact traffic on West Swan Road in the Swan Valley. It will impact those businesses. So you will have to hear the input from all those other stakeholders that will be impacted before you make a decision. And at that point, that will also still just be a recommendation to the Commission that will have to make the decision. Now, that process will take at least 5 to 6 months. So there will be a delay in the delivery of the housing.
Just a really quick follow-up question. Following through with Councillor Henderson's motion, would that allow the proponent and the Commission to possibly incorporate the separate parcel of land that isn't part of the structure plan?
Madam Mayor, through you, that separate parcel of land, the current status of that is that the MRS amendment is being advertised. So the normal process for an MRS amendment, once it's advertised, those submissions will have to be compiled by the department, and then it goes to the Commission. So that could be another 6 months or longer before a decision on the MRS is done. And only once the MRS is in place can a structure plan be prepared for that land, because that will entail a amendment scheme to the council's local planning scheme at the same time. So you wouldn't be able to get a structure plan formally in the process submitted in 6 months' time.
And a question from Councillor Podovnik.
Yes, just on that same theme, just so I'm clear, because from what I understand, this motion is contrary to our Metropolitan Regional Scheme and our town planning scheme. So how long will the delay be? Did you say it was longer than 6 months? Did you say it was 12 or 18 months?
Madam Mayor, to be more clear on it, the process that will be required as a result of this motion will entail the provision of an alternate or modified structure plan. That structure plan will take at least, say, minimum of a month to be prepared. That then needs to be advertised for 42 days. So what I'm saying is the decision by council on a revised structure plan will be in 6 months' time. That is so there will be a delay of 6 months to get back to the point where we are today. And if the Commission then, as a result of the council recommendation, decide that Henneybrook Avenue is not constructed further south, that component may not delay the development on this specific site, but that will require further scheme amendments to deal with the implications of that decision. Those scheme amendments will have to address the modification to the developer contribution plans and the rest of it, which will take place thereafter. So it will trigger a very long process that will have a major implication over time.
So again, through you, Madam Mayor, what I'm hearing is that a very, very lengthy delay. Is that correct?
It's a lengthy delay to get back to this point. That's 6 months. And the further implications, whether that delays development, is difficult to say, and to what extent the rest of it will delay development. But it will certainly require a lot of additional work and additional actions to facilitate development in the longer term.
Through you again, Madam Mayor, what impact, if any, would this new structure plan have on our developer contribution plans?
If this motion results in a modified structure plan that doesn't allow for that doesn't include the extension of Henneybrook Avenue, the developer contribution plans for Brabham and Dayton will have to be modified so as to address the contributions that would have been taken from developers up to that point. That would entail either the reimbursement of those monies back to the developers, or if the amended DCP considers alternate upgrades to other roads at a cost, the Commission may consider that some of that cost be allocated to the upgrade of those roads. So therefore the implication is either the reimbursement of all the contributions to developers or part thereof, depending on the outcome.
Final question through you, Madam Mayor. Can you give us an estimation as to how much that cost would be to the City of Swan?
On Henrybrook Avenue, the contributions relating to Henrybrook Avenue at this point in time for Bram, we've accepted 14 million for contributions, and for Dayton 16 million at this point in time.
Councillor Zanino, did you have a question?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I've got a quick question. It's been stated by the executive manager that it's going to take anything from 5 to 6 months for, if this motion is successful, for it to come back to this council. The question I'm asking is, when it does come back to this council, let's say in 6 months' time, and hypothetically, what the applicants come up with is once again not acceptable to the council or to the community, what are the options open for the council at that point then? What's the next process?
Through you, Mr. van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, when the application comes back to council, so it will be that revised structure plan, the council's options will obviously be to approve or not to approve that revised structure plan. It could entail an alternate to go back to the structure plan as was submitted, the one that we've got in front of us today, or it could include a scenario where council recommend an approval of another plan which sits somewhere in between with other modifications to any of those structure plans. Or it could be a decision similar to Councillor Catalano's motion tonight not to approve anything. So it's up to council at that stage to make a recommendation based on information at the time.
So hypothetically, we could be wasting 6 months of this council and the applicant's time.
It's difficult for me to answer that question, Madam Mayor, whether it's wasting time or whether that time's taken to just confirm where you are today. Depends whether you see that as time wasting.
Thank you, Mr. van der Linde. Councillor Dawn.
Thanks very much. Just in relation to what Councillor Miles said, it's definitely not delaying development. I believe this is addressing unresolved issues when it comes to the pragmatic.
Is that a question?
Oh,
for staff? Yeah, you've got to put it into a question.
Oh, okay.
Staff time.
No, I was just moving along with my
Yeah,
statement.
no, we have to be quite
Sorry about
specific.
that.
That's okay. We'd get better at practicing that. We're going to put it into a question. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of questions from me. Am I correct that the submission of this structure plan was delayed because the location of Whiteman Park Station was changed numerous times, moved around?
Through you, Mr. van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, my understanding from meetings, our regular meetings with the applicants, developer in this area, was that they've been working on the structure plan for a very long time, and initially the structure plan didn't, the location of the station wasn't specific, so they had various options with the station in a different location. So essentially the the decision on the location of the station did delay the development in a broader area, I would say.
My next question, Madam Mayor, through you to the Director of Planning or Exec Director. The question was asked about the DCP funds, and if I heard correctly, the Director said 14 million for Bram and $16 million for Dayton, and I think I heard the word there'd be a cost to this council. Am I correct that the DCP funds for the 14 and 16 million, if Henley Brook Avenue didn't go ahead, it's not a cost to the city, it's just that we don't spend the DCP funds and they go back, i.e. it's not our funds, they're held in a DCP.
Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct. The DCP contributions are funds that we hold, and if the road's not constructed at all or any other upgrades are not required as a result of the road not being constructed, that money has to be paid back to the developers.
And final question, we obviously are holding money, we'll take money through DCP for the construction of Henley Brook Avenue. What happens if the construction cost that we thought it was going to cost however many years ago is 4 times more? Is that a cost to the City of Swan then, i.e. a shortfall?
Yes, noting that the developer contribution cost is reviewed on an annual basis, you should, as the design of the road progresses, the cost will be upgraded. So we must just note that as a start. But normally on a project like this, there will be a shortfall, and that shortfall is for the city. And normally, what then happens is, we also consider other available funds through grants by state government.
So,
but it is the shortfall is a cost to the city. Yes.
Has there been a review on the expected cost of construction? So do we know what the current shortfall liability is, noting that it will just get bigger and bigger?
My understanding, and Mr. Coton may have more detail, but the design of that road hasn't progressed to a point where detailed costs are available. It's just a concept that's been costed on and that's based on the best available information at this stage.
Through you, Mr. Coton.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to add to what Mr. van der Linde said, Council will recall that Council put a hold on all work south of Park Street on that project about 3.5 years ago now, so no further design work or cost estimation has occurred in that time.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Bowman? Councillor, is there any other? Councillor Podovnik?
Just so that I'm clear, is the DCP considered to be revenue in our budgets? How's that? Good.
To you, Mr. Trafaskas.
Through the chair, yes, we record that as non-operating revenue. Yeah.
And my final question, based on the information that we have, what's the likelihood that Henley Brook Avenue won't be constructed further south?
Through you, Mr. van der Linde.
Madam Mayor, just purely based on the planning done to date, the planning framework to date, the traffic modelling to date, if you consider our report on this matter, from a staff perspective, the road is required to be extended at this point.
Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a follow-on question about the DCP funds. If they're treated as revenue coming in, how do they appear on our balance sheet at the moment?
Through you, Mr. Trafaskas.
Through the chair, so it's recognised as revenue matching with the asset recognition. So it would be held whilst, so when that asset's recognised, there'll be matching operating revenue recognised at the same time. Otherwise, it's held as a liability until that time.
Councillors, are there any further questions for staff? Councillor Henderson.
The question about the DCP and its application to the road infrastructure, as these things progress, Am I correct in my understanding that planning of where things go and what they are can be agreed and negotiated with the department and the developer?
To Mr. Vanderlyn.
Madam Mayor, the process will entail, so if we accept that council resolves at some point in the future not to extend Henrybrook Avenue, the result of that will be that we will have to prepare an amendment scheme to address an amended developer contribution plan that doesn't facilitate the extension of the road. At that point, one will have to then look at where does this traffic go that would have gone along that road, and what implications of that will be. That may, for instance, require other intersections or other roads to be upgraded, which is not currently funded through the current DCP. So essentially, as a start, you'll have to accept that the money for the part of Henrybrook Avenue is not available anymore. That has to be returned to the developers. You will then have to justify through that scheme amendment what needs to be included in a revised developer contribution plan, which may include contributions for other infrastructure. And that would then come to council. Council will recommend a scheme amendment that includes those costs to be included in a revised DCP. But the decision on that will be by the Commission. So it's not negotiated, it's justified through that process, but the end decision of that will be out of hands of council. It will be a decision by the WAPC and eventually the Minister.
Thank you. I'm going to ask now, is there anyone who would like to speak against the motion? Councillor Catalano.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the history lesson. But, I don't want to conflate the past with the present. A lot of really bad things have happened to our environment, even over the last 50 years. A lot of bad things have happened over the last 200 years. So, what are we going to do? Are we going to continue down that same track, making bad decisions and not protect our natural environment and nature? The other thing is that this amendment still means that at least 2,000 trees, mature native trees, are going to be destroyed. And you've already heard me, they're really important trees now, because we're talking about the last of the last, because of what they provide for all the other living beings, also for how they will contribute to the maintenance of nature and the natural environment in the whole of the city of Swan, including in the Swan Valley, including on Whitemore Park, including on that Bush Forever site. Now, things can't be changed. Of course things can be changed, and the classic example of that is Row 8. In fact, clearing went ahead, didn't it? They were given approval, and didn't it stop? Yes, it has. And hasn't it been replanted? Yes, it has. That's because things can be stopped, they can be reviewed, and they can be revised. And good decisions can be made. So, it's not all over, it's not a given, nothing's final, nothing's over. We need to make a stand for our environment. That is what we are here to do. And sadly, I do not believe that this is doing that, because 2,000 trees destroyed. It's still pretty much the same structure plan that's put before us by the proponent. Yeah, and we heard a lot about, it will kick the can down the road. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to come back, and we're going to be still back at the same position, as Councillor Zanino pointed out. Look, it's out of date. I mean, this is, the history of what went on 30 or 40 years ago. It doesn't matter, because we are where we are now, and we are in a seriously tragic situation. We are talking about the last of the last here now, and, everything has to go out the window. So sorry that I think when this comes back, if this gets through tonight, when this comes back for council to reconsider, I really do urge you to look at a no to WAPC. That's a loud and clear message. These conditions, I don't believe they're going to take the slightest bit of notice of them, and I don't think that they will negotiate with council on any of these conditions, because in fact it's basically a yes, it's an approval. As for the clearing, I mean, do you think that just because there's a clearing permit, that clearing is going to continue if the structure plan doesn't go through? I think it won't. I think what will happen is that land that has got a clearing permit will actually be incorporated into the Bush Forever site, thereby contributing to the natural environment and the natural, the natural environment of the city of Swan, or the whole of the city of Swan. This goes all the way up to the vines. It goes all the way up to, what's left of the natural environment in Ellenbrook. I mean, we've got to start creating corridors, and that's why we need these. That's why we need these bits of bushland. Save 2,000, at least 2,000 mature native trees. I mean, goodness me, that is just, when you think about it, you think about losing even one tree. You even think about losing 10. The devastation, the heartache that causes. I mean, this is 2,000. And people, got to have somewhere to live. But, why don't we start looking at actually properly redesigning our city, our built urban environment? Why don't we do that? Why don't we actually look at doing that? I mean, it's been on the table, but it hasn't been strong enough. And I know there's opposition to that, but ultimately the arguments are much stronger than for knocking over, hectares of bushland. So, I can't say any more, that this is just a retrograde step.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. I'm going to ask for the last time, is there anyone for or against? Councillor Dawn.
Thanks very much. I'm for the motion. I think this is the developers need to take this as a terrific opportunity for a better and more consistent structure plan. There's many unresolved issues that exist within the current structure plan, and now this is an opportunity for better planning that will reflect the community's expectations. The widening of Yuildene Road to 4 lanes is quite a given. Access to the train seems to be a basic mistake. The ecological link, that's not even considered. There's no consideration given to the kangaroo management plan and their habitat. Morally, the loss of 2,000 trees I find unacceptable, and that was a moral vote that I had to with Councillor Catalano. But this is a pragmatic agenda motion that's proposed. It's pragmatic, and it does address what we can actually contribute towards, and what Councillor Henderson has actually said. Especially about this going back to government bodies, which includes the local water management strategy, to ensure that the surrounding vegetation, the Banksia woodlands, are not flooded. So I do urge the councillors to accept and to support this motion, simply because it's the best option at the moment.
Thank you. Councillors, does anyone like to speak against the motion?
Can I please speak against? All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be really quick. I'm rising to speak against this motion. As I've previously outlined, I was going to move the officer's recommendation pending this doesn't pass. But I just, I want to reiterate, I, am a big, advocate for the environment. I definitely am. I spoke in Parliament when I was younger about the issue of habitat fragmentation. I think that's a really disappointing thing that's happened in our planning landscape in Western Australia. But unfortunately, those mechanisms are in place, and we have the Metropolitan Region Scheme as it sits, and we have this LPS in front of us now, and it's not the right thing, I think, for the thousands of people in Western Australia that are without a home, particularly my generation. And if we want to go on about how, yes, somewhere people need to live, and yes, we should have some solutions to urban development, it's easy to say that once you're sitting in your own property somewhere in a built-up area like Midland or Guildford, but homes need to be built, and it's overdue. absolutely overdue. This development will include affordable housing and social housing that, as we all know, is something that is, not been achieved in the way we needed it to be. But a 6-month delay at least is not acceptable for me. And morally, I think I can't agree with this motion, and I'd encourage you to support the officer's recommendation if this does fail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Henderson, you're right to reply. Was there anyone, we did call, we're nearly at the end. Is there anyone else? Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would like to speak against the motion. Councillors, the structure plan as submitted is consistent with the zoning of the land under both the MRS and the LPS 17. We do need to acknowledge that. I don't believe, and I thank Councillor Henderson for his motion considerations, it's not the compromise we need. I don't believe it isn't, because the approvals have already been given. The delays are significant. The recommendations from our officers allow suggestions without delays. Our recommendation won't change the approval in place. They're already given, and I do applaud the hard work of residents in their plight with our spaces and growth corridors and what needs to happen into the future. And specifically, it is what needs to happen into the future. And as a council, refusing this and adding complexity to a basic set of recommendations which allows this approval will not feed well. And I do believe that the bigger picture for the City of Swan as a growth council with significant growth areas to grow a population to 300,000 by 2050 is about making a stand, advocating and leveraging our position as a comprehensive council and allowing mechanisms and processes, influences in future planning to address those environmental concerns and considerations for our future growth. That is where we need to focus our efforts and make sure that future forward and focused is really, really an important thing. Losing these trees break my heart. I'm even working with a local scientist through Whiteman with some of the flight paths of the local eagle populations. And there are things that are going to significantly affect them as well. But councillors, this is done. Row 8 was very different again. I don't think it's apples for apples. Let's approve this, but let's look at what we need to do moving forward with our mechanisms and processes and influence for what we need to do in the future for our city and our residents.
Thank you, Councillor McCulloch. I'll ask again, does anyone like to speak for the motion? Is there anyone who would like to speak against the motion? Councillor Budovnik.
Just very briefly, I just want to make the point that this motion actually includes all the points in the officer's recommendation. But it goes further and it asks for the creation of a new structure plan. But we've heard tonight it's highly likely that Henley Brook Avenue will be constructed further south, and the current structure plan accommodates for this. We've also heard tonight it's not a simple process, the delays will be costly, and ultimately the final decision will not be ours to make. Please don't support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Budovnik. I'm now going to ask Councillor Henderson for his right of reply.
Gee, Madam Mayor, sounds like I'm playing to a tough crowd. Okay, I just want to cover one key point from Councillor McCulloch first. We're not refusing this. I'll make it very clear, we don't want to refuse this. We're not saying to refuse it. We want to make it better. Can I be very clear about that? It's important that we look at what has been proposed by the developer we've identified areas that there are problems with, and we're saying let's go back to the drawing board and get it right. We're not saying go away. We don't want to work with you. We do want to work with the developer. This is the key point that I want to get across to you all. Now, here's the thing. Do you know how long it takes to start a development and get a single house to market? I can tell you it's years. And the bottom line is, in my view, this won't make a significant difference whatsoever to putting houses on the market. Guess what? There's blocks being produced hand over fist. Go out there and have a look. You can go out there and you can buy a block of land. There's plenty of land to buy. So I think we shouldn't get hung up on having a period of time for this to be worked through. There was a discussion about impact on West Swan Road. Well, that may happen, that may not. The only impact would be if Henley Brook Ave comes down to Yuldean and stops there, would be on Wilcott Avenue. And we've already had discussions about Wilcott Avenue and whether or not we might cul-de-sac that. So the other issues around DCP funds, well, quite clearly the cost of doing anything these days has gone up significantly. We haven't reviewed it, I think, for about 3 odd years. So we're probably talking about having to find double the money or more. The point is with the DCP, if we decide to make changes to structure and our structure plans, well then we rehash that and look at how we're going to manage that, and it becomes part of our relationship with the developers. So again, I think red herrings are live tonight in a couple of areas with that. Now, in terms of those DCP funds, that's negotiated with the state, the developer, and us. So I think the important thing to note about that is it's something that can be managed, if you like. The high school, again, it's going to take years for that to be built. So what we're talking about here is not a significant impact on the progress of that. Just want to be clear, Councillor Catalano. I accept that you don't want this to happen. There's 2 more options in front of you. There's this one and the next one, which is an even worse one. So I think in this sphere, we've got to be pragmatic about how we deal with it. You can't just say, well, I don't want to vote for it. Well, where does that leave you? It leaves you with a worse option. So, councillors, it's been a long debate. It's one that has divided not only the community but the council, it seems, and it's one that is, in my mind, critical about the development of the area to be able to encompass all of those key areas that we have identified. Councillor Dawn, Councillor Bowman and myself sat down with planners and worked through and identified those issues. They need to be addressed. We would like the developer to address them. If we can get some work happening with the State Planning Commission on that land west of Isidon, we may in fact end up with a really good outcome, as opposed to what is fundamentally insular, single point of development, which doesn't address the bigger and broader issues, and that's what we're trying to do here. So please consider hard about that, councillors. It's critical for the community, it's critical for our area, and it's something that we have to do. I appreciate if you would support my motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Henderson, and thank you very much, councillors. I'm going to put that to the vote. Those in favour? So Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor Knight. Remember, I'm just going slowly for the ward clerk as well. Councillor Henderson, Councillor Singh, Councillor Johnson and Councillor Howlett. And those against, is Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Zanino, and Councillor Brodovnik, and myself. So, 1, 2, 3. Carried 9-6. Thank you. 9-5. Thank you to everyone in the gallery. If you're staying, you're welcome. We're going to now consider having a 10-minute break. We are. So, councillors, I'll ask if you'd like to continue, if there's anyone against, or if there's anyone who'd like a 10-minute break. Sounds like the majority is a 10-minute break. For those viewing at home online, council will take a 10-minute break and return at 8:37. Thank you. Thank you, councillors and staff. To those viewers at home, we've just come back online after a 10-minute break, and we have 15.1, Councillor Bowman, Massara Avenue and Henley Brook Avenue intersection review on page 337. Councillor Bowman, please read out your notice of motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I move that Council resolves to, 1, that a review of the decisions at the intersection of Massara Avenue and Henley Brook Avenue and Henley Brook be limited, left in, left out, be undertaken and a report provided to Council on the outcome of this review. And the reason for the motion, there's been significant changes and development in the area since the original decision and design was made. Residents of Morganfield have advised that they will be significantly impacted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henderson? Is anyone against? No? Then it's carried.
We've lost Councillor Singh.
Oh, hang on a minute.
Resume.
Just trying to message and see.
Should be able to hear us.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
We can't see him.
My camera doesn't appear to be on.
His camera's not on. Can you text him? Just
And message him. It's on the Teams chat here.
okay.
He hasn't read it.
He hasn't responded yet. So, Madam Mayor,
I'm just messaging
you
as
can
well.
continue the meeting if you wish. Here he is back with us.
Okay.
Okay.
So do we need to repeat
You
that
just
then?
need to repeat that we've had the
Okay.
motion moved and seconded.
Councillor Singh, we just moved the motion and we had it seconded and by Councillor Henderson, and there was no one against. Did you wish to, were you against that motion? Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. So we just moved, Councillor Bowman just moved his motion and Councillor Henderson seconded it and there was no one against. Were you against that motion?
No.
Okay, so that's carried. Carried 14. Nil. Thank you. And now we move on to 15.2, which is Councillor Howlett, our friendly principles and practices within the City of Swan, which is on page 340. Councillor Howlett, if you'd like to read out your notice of motion.
Thank you. So my notice of motion is that the council resolved that the City of Swan investigate the adoption of owl-friendly principles and practices within the city's area of responsibility and influence, including A, ensuring that rodenticide treatments used by the city for protection of its assets are owl-friendly, specifying rodenticide treatments in commercial pest operators' contracts are owl-friendly, sourcing and providing information from relevant sources such as BirdLife Australia on the city's website for the community and businesses on owl-friendly choices for rodent control. D, the city providing educational flyers to all food businesses and caravan parks as part of its regular inspections. E, connecting with other owl-friendly councils and shires to share information and experiences on implementing owl-friendly resources and practices. F, promotion of an owl-friendly campaign on the city's social media platforms and to local land care and friends groups. G, a timeline for implementation of citywide owl-friendly practices. H, adopting a commitment to owl-friendly principles and practices as a component of the city's local biodiversity strategy. And 2, city staff report back to councillors on the findings of the investigation into the adoption of owl-friendly principles and practices, including identified new actions which are not already in place through the city's business planning processes for the 25-26, which is commencing in October 24. And the reason for my motion is second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides pose a significant risk to wildlife and pets through secondary poisoning occurring after consuming rodents and other wildlife that have eaten the bait. wildlife at risk from second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides in metropolitan suburbs include all marsupials and birds attracted to the grain-based baits, and all diurnal and nocturnal marsupials and birds that feed on dead and dying animals that have accessed the baits. Many local governments in WA have taken steps to manage rodents, including educating their local and business communities in a wildlife responsible manner. To date, councils that have publicly committed to being owl-friendly, following the lead of Margaret River, Augusta Margaret River, are Denmark, Nannup, Fremantle and Mundaring. With such a large and diverse area covering urban, industrial, rural and bushland, the City of Swan would benefit from the adoption of owl-friendly principles and practices to protect owl deaths from secondary poisoning.
Thank you, Councillor Howlett. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dawn. I ask if there's anyone against the motion. There's no one. Question, Councillor Henderson.
I understand the intentions, but is this more of an operational matter? Ask the CEO.
Through you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Henderson. There's nothing inappropriate asking this matter to be investigated by staff, particularly as it deals with policy related to the city's overall environmental credentials. Otherwise, staff would simply continue with the existing existing practices. So I don't believe it's operational. Council can set policy around and guidance around this.
I'll ask again, is there anyone against the motion? Was that yes or no? No, Councillor Singh? Okay, so if there's no one against the motion, then it's carried. 14-0. Now, councillors, we're going to move to item 16, which is confidential items. 16.1, councillors, the CEO performance review for 2024, and it's an absolute majority vote required. I need a councillor to foreshadow the officer's recommendation. Councillor Bowman, is it?
I'll move till we go behind closed doors. All staff leave except for the legal counsel and the minute taker.
Thank you. That's if, but that's only if councillors wish to debate this item. So anyone who wishes to debate the item? Thank you. So councillors, motion to go behind closed doors and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Thank you. And we'll just ask staff if they would like to depart. Thank you. Thank you to those people watching at home online. Council have come out behind closed doors. Item number 16, which was the CEO Performance Review 2024, was concluded, and it was carried to endorse the CEO's performance review and the recommendations that were contained within the minutes, and it was 10-4 carried. Thank you very much everyone for watching tonight, and we'll close the meeting at 9:14.